Welcome back to Following Noadon, a Stormlight podcast. This week is episode 68, and we have chapters 45, 46, 47, and 48 of Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson to discuss. Paul, how are you?
I'm fantastic.
Good. Elliot?
Also doing fantastic, ready to talk more Oathbringer. I feel like we've been getting so much good stuff lately. I go through the weeks like just eager for recording nights, like, ooh, I gotta talk about it.
We do have some good stuff this week, which we'll talk about here in a second. Do you guys have 2 words to summarize the episode? Paul?
I do have 2 words.
Can I hear them?
Yes, you may. Thank you for so my 2 words are inspiration and drama.
Okay. Inspiration and drama. Elliot?
I'm going to take my 2 words and smush them together into one. I'm going to take friends and enemies, and my 1 word will be frenemies.
Frenemies. All right, let's use these
It's a good one.
3.5 words and talk about our episode. All right. This might be the first episode where we do not have a point of view chapter from either Kaladin, Shallan, or Dalinar. We have 4 chapters, and none of them are by any of our 3 main characters. What are you guys' takeaway from that? We were getting into some niche, they're not. They are secondary characters. I'll just say that. They're secondary characters. And we've got 4 chapters from point of view from them.
You think they're secondary characters?
Right now they are.
How do you think they would feel? You should tell them to their face.
I should.
You should tell
Jasnah what I would
character.
do. Yeah.
Yeah. Should be so mad at you.
I didn't actually think about it that way because even though they are secondary characters, don't hit me, Jasnah. It's not like side plot though. It still is like main plot stuff. So I'm still tying it into the rest of it. But you're absolutely right. We don't have a Kaladin or Shallan or Dalinar point of view. This is kind of odd.
We have 2 Moash point of view chapters. We have a Scar point of view chapter, which I'm fairly confident this is our first Scar point of view chapter. And we have a Jasnah point of view chapter.
We did. And I didn't actually realize it until you mentioned it that we don't have our main characters. But my 2 cents right quick is that I'm very happy and excited about it. I think it's really cool just because we're seeing them woven in so much more to the story. And also I've just heard it alluded to that, like, especially in the 4th book in Rhythm of War, it's like you have so many point of view chapters, it just like kind of keeps going, and I was kind of excited for that. I'm excited to see from all of our characters, so I'm stoked.
Cool. Your 2 words, Paul, what do they mean and why?
So inspiration is talking about our Scar chapter. He really inspires Lyn to wield Stormlight and kind of in turn enables or unlocks some of his own ability there, which was really cool to see. My other word is drama, which I almost messed up and made this 2 words because I wanted it to be like Spren drama or something like that. But this is just referring to, we see a little bit from our Ink Spren person there, our little other bizarre kiddo, and he doesn't really like. We get some drama, some Spren drama between him and all the other groups, and so, yeah, messy, you know.
And Elliot?
I really like those words, Paul. It touches on some good stuff. I almost picked something like inspiration because I had totally keyed into that with the Scar chapter as well. But instead, I went with frenemies because I think we had a couple examples of people that are interacting in some weird ways where I can't tell if they're full on enemies or if they're friends or if they're frenemies. The Spren is one of those, just like you were talking about, Paul, with the Ink Spren and how they apparently don't like cryptics or honor Spren. So there's that. And then in the Moash chapters, we've got the Parshmen, and I'm starting to get confused about who is who in the Parshman world and who's on what side and who I'm supposed to be caring about and rooting for and who's the bad guys. Like the perspective is getting shifted on me, and I don't know if Moash is now friends with some of these Parshmen or not friends. It's all over the map.
Yeah. The lines are certainly being blurred there, because back in the Way of Kings, we had our cut and dry Parshmen, bad. Or Parshendi, bad.
Yep.
Bridgeman, good. And now we've got, Moash talking to Parshmen. Are we rooting for Moash still? Are we rooting for the Parshmen? What's happening here?
Exactly.
So. All right. Let's start talking. Yeah, we can start talking before chapter 45. Moash gets dropped off in Revelar, which is a city pretty much in the smack dab center of Kholinar, and it becomes pretty evident to Moash pretty quickly that the Parshendi, the Voidbringers, they are beginning a siege on Alethkar. Kholinar, specifically, the capital. And there's all sorts of manual labor that he is seeing happening between 45 and 48. And at first glance, his perception of the Voidbringers and the Fused is that they treat people fairly. It's not till he has a closer look later on in chapter 48 that he realizes that's not even the case completely either, because they start to abuse and be overlords to the Parshmen, the awakened Parshmen. So there's some interesting dynamics here, Eliot, and your word kind of summed that up. So what were your guys' thoughts on 45 and then pushing into 48?
I continue to be surprised by the Parshmen, because everything we were told, I feel like all the way through Way of Kings and even through Words of Radiance leading up until the battle, was that the Voidbringers are coming, the old gods are returning, they're going to devour the land, they're just going to sweep through and decimate everybody. And sometimes it feels like that's the motive here, and then other times it's not. And the fact that they're treating Moash and the other human slaves very respectfully and almost kindly in some ways, that they're clearly slaves, but they're not being mean to them or abusive anyway. They let them, pick their jobs that they want to do, and other things like that. Is like, this is not fitting into the mold at all of where I thought this was going.
I pretty much agree with Eliot on that. I didn't fully expect this. For one, I was kind of surprised to be getting like these Moash perspective episodes or chapters. Yeah, I don't have too much to add, I guess, from 45.
Something I do want to highlight here that doesn't quite have to do with Parshmen versus humans. It's still the dynamic of Darkeyes versus Lighteyes. And you see it here in chapter 45, you see it in 46, and you see it in 48. And the amount of times that Lighteyes is mentioned specifically is it's being brought to the forefront of Lighteyes versus Darkeyes, where Moash, in the back of his head, still holds this huge grudge against Lighteyes, and he wants to see them do the manual labor that the Parshmen have always had to do, where he sees this guy who's got pale green eyes, he's a Lighteyes, obviously a lord of Revelar, the city that's been taken over here, and he volunteers to carry water, and that gives Moash a little bit of satisfaction in the back of his mind. He's like, he should carry water after everything he's done to the Darkeyes. So the Parshmen getting back at him for us, like that's great. So, and then chapter 46, Kaladin gets called a Bright Lord and a Lighteyes by maybe a scribe. I don't remember who calls him a Lighteyes, and Kaladin's late to opening the gate for opening the Oath Gate, and the scribe says, like typical Lighteyes, keeping people waiting on everybody, and Scar's like, you better not let Kaladin hear you say that about him, because he'd be really upset if you called him a Lighteyes, and typical Lighteyes keeping everybody waiting. So there's some prejudice still happening here.
This was really ironic. I thought this was super funny, actually, the specific part, because just as the reader, we know how much turmoil and like inner grief there is with Kaladin for Lighteyes throughout his whole trope. That was super evident in probably our first book, and still so in the second book. We haven't seen as much in this third book. I feel like we've kind of moved on from that. But here we like see someone discounting him as just like, oh, some idiot Lighteyes. And it's really funny to see, because I don't know, he's getting stereotyped over something he is like almost the exact opposite of.
And I think irony is the right word for it too, because Kaladin even has a moment in 46, if I remember correctly, where he makes some kind of comment about it. It feels wrong to have Lighteyes joining Bridge 4 or something like that, because they've got some recruits that are potential recruits that are coming in that are Lighteyes, and the other bridgemen are kind of looking at Kaladin like, dude, you realize that you're a Lighteyes, right? Like, it's just that deep set like thought in Kaladin's head of, oh no, not them.
Right. Kaladin even has a line where it's like, he mentions offhand, and he says, oh, maybe I should have said that Lighteyes weren't allowed to join, and because they're not allowed here in Bridge 4. And then somebody says, well, what happens when we all start being Knights Radiant? We're going to be like, you didn't think that through real quick, because we're all about to be Lighteyes, so why does that matter?
And they're writing off Renarin yet again. Renarin's in Bridge 4. He's a Lighteyes. I think somebody points that out in the scene, like, oh, what about Renarin? Oh, he doesn't count. Like, Renarin seems like he never counts. Poor guy.
Sad day.
It's in a good way and bad way, which I think is kind of funny. They're like, Renarin doesn't get, like, yeah, he can be in Bridge 4. He like doesn't count as a Lighteyes. But in the same respect, it's like he's not looked at in the positive light of a Lighteyes as well.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he's this true, like, neutral that's kind of forgotten about, but remember, it's an odd, like, dynamic, but I think it's really neat.
All right. Pop quiz time.
Uh-oh.
Could either of you have told me anything about Scar before this chapter?
I think all I could probably tell you...
4.
He is in Bridge 4. I kind of had lumped him in my mind next to Moash in like the doesn't like Kaladin, but Kaladin wins him over. He's really good at fighting category. Okay. But I don't think I could tell you anything else besides that.
I agree. So I remember reading The Way of Kings, and what I remember most was kind of thinking of almost like a pecking order of like fighters. I would think of like Kaladin, and there's like Moash. We don't see that much of Teft, but I always put him in there with Moash. I kind of viewed them as like the good and bad versions of like a number 2 almost, or next in rank fighter. And then Scar was kind of with them, but maybe not as notable. I thought we had some time. I could be making this up or just totally remembering this wrong. I would have to go back and look at our earlier episodes. But didn't we have a talk that there was allusion to Scar's past, and that he may have been like a shard bearer or something like that, and I thought that opened up a do you have to be a Lighteyes to be a shard bearer conversation, but I could be, I'm probably way off. I don't remember well enough to say, but...
I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think you are correct, because Scar comes with to do the training with the shard blades in the war camps once they've become bodyguards, and oh my gosh, what's his name? Zyle. Yeah, Zyle says, hey, you should train with shard blades because Zeth's got a shard blade. You're going to get up against one eventually. Come train with shard blades. And Scar comes along with that. So he is kind of that second tier behind Moash of like the lieutenant fighter guy of you need a champion, this is your guy. So what were your guys' thoughts on him during this chapter where he's really having trouble finding his spot in Newbridge 4? He's not able to suck in Stormlight. He's kind of resigned himself to the support squad by the end of the chapter of, okay, Rock, I'm gonna help you, cook and clean and all that sort of thing, and that's gonna be my lot because I'm not sucking in Stormlight. And then eventually he does, which we'll get to in a second. But he's really trying to find his spot. He was the fighter guy, and now everybody else can use Stormlight, and so they're better than he is, and so he has to resign himself to the support squad.
This was at a minimum a very funny scene, because isn't Rock like, you're getting nowhere near my stew? Like,
yes.
Like, I can't let a airsick lowlander mess this up for me or all this stuff, which was pretty funny. But I do have to say, I'm going to give props to Scar. I've never thought negatively of Scar, but I've also never been like, oh, he's a hero or a great figure. He just hasn't been that notable. But in this, it shows that he seems like a great guy, like at least to notice or kind of not be too ambitious of things where like he's stepping down and still wanting to feel like a support role. Just says a lot about his character, and also his like motivation with Lynn and things like that was pretty cool. So it was really nice to see.
I too thought this was a great chapter. I love the little mini journey that Scar goes on from the start of this chapter to the end, where the start he's just trying so hard to get there when everyone else is getting there and he's not. Like you can feel that frustration, you can empathize with him there. And then the moment where he like gets the payoff, the moment where he gets the Stormlight is the moment where he just accepts, maybe that's not who I am. Maybe I will just be the support. Somebody's got to do it. Like, just like you said, Paul, like the character it takes to do that, to not, latch on to that or get bitter about the fact that everyone else is getting these awesome powers and I'm not. The fact that he can, one, talk Lynn through that journey. Like he just sits down and talks her through, well, why do you really want to become a Windrunner? And like inspire her, and then in turn inspire himself to that. Like that was really cool. That was really cool to see Scar. This was like a whole little, character lesson or hero's journey all packed into one chapter, it felt like.
I want to read it real quick because it is pretty compact. So take a sip of your tea there, Paul, and I'll bless your ears here. This is Scar talking to start. Stop right there. You want to be a Windrunner? More than anything, Lynn whispered. Why? Because I want to soar. Not good enough. Kaladin, he wasn't thinking about being left out or how great it would be to fly. He was thinking about saving the rest of us. Saving me. Why do you want to be in the Windrunners? Because I want to help. I want to do something other than stand around waiting for the enemy to come to us. Well, you have a chance, Lynn. A chance nobody has had for ages. A chance in millions. Either you seize it, and in doing so decide you're worthy, or you leave and give up. But if you leave, you don't get to complain. As long as you keep trying, there's a chance. When you give up, that's when the dream dies. Then Lynn accepts that and keeps trying and eventually starts glowing. And then later down the page it said, Scar took a long breath. Long, satisfied breath. Well, that was 2 he'd helped so far, counting Rock. He could live with that, couldn't he? And it's not till he accepts that role of fostering other people to Stormlight that he can really do it himself. So it's all about finding that deeper meaning of what it means to be a Windrunner's, helping others and protecting others. Because that's what Lynn said. She wants to help. She wants to be able to do something and not just wait for the enemy to come to them. And then Scar said, oh no, I am just satisfied with helping others. I like satisfy their calling. That's when he begins to suck in Stormlight. So we're getting some rules here of how to be a Windrunner.
I just love how that fits in with the Windrunner ethos, just that whole outwardly focused. It's not about me, it's about the people around me, it's about protecting those that can't protect themselves, like all of that. It just all fits together so nicely. It's just so well written. So well written.
I agree.
I am very grateful for this chapter, just because, like I said, I didn't have necessarily strong feelings for Scar. My impression of Scar is he's the character who, on first impression, you think is going to be bad or something. I mean, his name is Scar. You're like, okay, he's going to be edgy and have this super dark personality or something like that. And he's just kind of he's an exemplary. Is that how you say it? He's an exemplary member of Bridge 4.
Oh, yeah, I think Scar just went from like bottom 2 on my members of Bridge 4 tier list to like top 3 in the course of like 8 pages. Like, that's how far he just came.
Yeah. Anything more from 46?
No further questions, Your Honor.
Just one quick thing before we move on is we're kind of just skipping over Rlain, but that's kind of like expected because everybody skips over Rlain. Everybody kind of forgets that he's there, and he's still there, that he's a Parshman and he's part of Bridge 4. Notably has not been able to suck in Stormlight, and up until this chapter, the women have had trouble sucking in Stormlight until Lynn figures it out, and Shallan, of course, but we're talking about the Windrunners here. And so Rlain is really the only one, by the end of this chapter, Rlain is the only one still having trouble with Stormlight. Do you think that's a coincidence or not?
It's got to be important somehow. I think they do mention one other member of Bridge 4 that hasn't, but it's David. Isn't that the guy that has like brain damage and he doesn't talk?
He hasn't talked since the very first bridge run you've ever seen in Way of Kings.
Yeah, so he could be like an exception that he's maybe damaged, and yeah, who knows? But yeah, Rlain, I did notice that he can't breathe in Stormlight. So is this a Parshman thing? Can they not wield Stormlight? Does Stormlight not interact with them the same way it does a human? Like, those are some of the questions popping into my brain as I read that.
I have 2 guesses to this. One is exactly what you just said. He's a Parshman. They can't just suck in Stormlight like the humans do. My only other thought is, it almost seems like there's a method of like morale behind them being able to suck in Stormlight. Like, Lopen was our first person to do that in the Bridge 4 crew, and I feel like he is also our most like just enthused, outgoing, like biggest personality.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end, the only person who hadn't kind of was like Scar, who we've seen kind of take a more like passive approach, I feel, or like, you know, he's tried all this stuff, but he's also been, I feel like, one of the most quiet, or at least we haven't seen much from him. And so I'm wondering if Rlain, it's part of just like the social difficulties, right? How Rlain struggled to feel like he fit in or things like that because things were different because he's a Parshman, which makes sense in our story. But I don't know if it's a thing where he can and is just like maybe discounting it as like, oh, I'm different, I'm a Parshman, I probably can't, and so he isn't like making a huge step or effort, or hasn't had that breakthrough.
So as you were talking, Paul, I thought of a third option though. What if so Rlain was always like the double agent guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
He actually was like a Parshendi pretending to be a Parshman.
Correct.
And then it turns out that, oh no, I'm actually with Bridge 4. Like, I'm fuzzy on the details, but he makes a decision at some point basically that, nope, I'm not joining the Parshendi, I'm staying with Bridge 4, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And from that point on, I've trusted him. He kind of, that pulls him into the, oh, okay, you're a good guy, we trust you. What if though he's actually like a triple agent and he actually is still playing for the Parshendi people? What if he is like a fused and he can't wield Stormlight because he's a wielder of the dark stuff, and he's playing it off as I'm still just a Parshman, and he like still is the undercover agent person.
That could be. That could be, or maybe it's just something where he isn't because he knows if he does, it will like give away or something like that.
Right.
That could be. As of right now, I am still convinced that he's on our team. I was trying to remember where his switch, I guess you should call it, is. And it was whenever all the Parshendi were first getting storm form, and there was just all the chaos that broke out over there. And he was just like, I'm out. Like him and I think some others were like, we're getting out of this situation, and he went to Bridge 4. But I'm gonna keep that in the back of my head though with the next reading we do. Because if there were ever hints dropped in there, it's very possible that he could be another a triple or quadruple agent, you know? We can just keep going. So.
And this might be a tinfoil hat conspiracy that I'm, spinning off here, but I think I too am going to maybe slot this aside as maybe we watch out for clues there. I'm with you. I think he is with Bridge 4 because that's part of the whole Bridge 4 theme, right? Is they accept anybody and anybody can be, Bridge 4. They're going to protect you no matter what. So if he really is still a sleeper agent, like that would be big, I feel like. So I'm going to slot this in as like a crazy, wild conspiracy theory, but it's another option, I think.
Good stuff. Chapter 47. All right, this is our Jasnah point of view chapter, and I want to start it by reading the beginning of the chapter, if you would let me.
You have my permission.
Thank you. I am Talonel Elin, Herald of War. The time of the return, the desolation is near at hand. We must prepare. You will have forgotten much, following the destruction of the times past. Kalak will teach you cast bronze, if you have forgotten this. We will soul cast blocks of metal directly for you. I wish we could teach you to steel, but casting is so much easier than forging. You must have something we can produce quickly. Your stone tools will not serve against what is to come. Vedel can train your surgeons, and Yezrian will teach you leadership. So much is lost between returns. I will train your soldiers. We should have time. Ishar keeps talking about a way to keep information from being lost following the desolations, and we have discovered something unexpected. We will use that Surgebinders to act as guardians, knights. The coming days will be difficult, but with training, humanity will survive. You must bring me to your leaders. The other heralds should join us soon. I think I am late this time. I fear, oh God, that I have failed. No, this is not right, is it? How long has it been? Where am I? I am Talonel Elin, Herald of War. The time of the turn, the desolation is near at hand. It kind of has an ellipsis there as if he's going to repeat exactly what he just said. So, is this question for you guys? Is this boring for you guys finding out more about heralds? Is this like boring you guys, or is this exciting?
I've been super excited for this. As soon as this happened and I knew it was Talonel Elin, I got super excited with this chapter. With him, it is kind of odd because there's a lot that we can learn. There's a whole lot, like in that what you just read. I'm assuming those are the other heralds he's referring to. Was it Velin and Yezrian?
And
another
Kalak. He mentions somebody else too.
Mm-hmm. He mentions a lot and kind of what they do, and I feel like we can even get a good picture of like which herald did what or was what order or things like that. And I do think it's very exciting.
I think coming out of Words of Radiance, heralds were one of our big things, right? That we wanted to learn about. I think so. I've enjoyed it. The little bits and nuggets we're getting about heralds.
I was also super intrigued, which we've talked about it briefly, and it made me more concerned reading this. Because he mentions, what is it, copper and steel? And those are just two of the like elementsy metals from the Mistborn series. It's just part of their magic system, like their Stormlight or whatever. And it has just gotten me very intrigued to hear more, if he says more, of like how that could somehow play together, or if maybe in like, so a lot of his struggle and when all the heralds are together or whatever, they're in damnation or stuff like that. And I've wondered like if there's, I don't know, has he traveled to these other places, or is it like, is he with people from Mistborn in damnation as well? Like, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff, like crazy stuff. But those like were definitely red flags that went off in my mind. For our viewers, I'm almost done with the first Mistborn book. I'm not super far into it, but I'm almost done with that. So I'm learning bit by bit. But that was just something that stuck out to me, which probably isn't that significant. But I noted, and I'm going to pay attention to it as we go forward. Let's see.
You haven't learned by now that those random like half sentences are actually important. You're like, it might not. It's probably not important. But I'm glad you paid attention to it.
Mm-hmm. It definitely, like, as soon as I heard it when reading, I was like, he said steel, like, and that's going to be significant, and that means Telenel is Kelsier or something like that, you know? And so, there we are. You heard it here first, folks. That's actually not true. My actual prediction is that Kelsier is Kaladin. So.
Oh boy.
Mm-hmm.
We get to meet Ivory in this chapter. Like properly. We've seen him before, but we haven't really spent any time with him. So, what are your guys' thoughts on Ivory?
He's an interesting one that balances out our cast of Spren characters. I picture him. He's definitely got to have like a British accent. He's like the posh, like slightly pompous. Oh well, yes, of course. Sort of. Voice. That's totally what I imagine. He's wearing a suit. I don't honestly remember how he's described, but in my mind he's clearly like wearing a suit that's all
he is described as wearing a suit. So
okay, perfect. That's the image I had in my head. So yeah, no, I thought it was great actually, and we learned some interesting bits from him, which was cool too.
Would you like to know how I pictured him in my mind?
Yes.
I have, ever since we like, I just haven't shaken this image from the like first time we get a glimpse of him at the beginning of Words of Radiance, right? Is that what it is?
Yes. And
it talked about him being like kind of an ink blob, and I thought of like Ink Mario from Super Mario Sunshine. I don't know if that rings a bell or if y'all have an image of that. But the like shadow inky Mario, that's with holding a paintbrush. That's exactly what I have been envisioning this whole time, including like currently. Totally. So
that's actually fairly accurate to what I have in my mind too, because he's described as black marble if somebody spilled black oil on it. So it's like black on shimmery on black, like very, very, very dark, but also like glinty at the same time. So I don't know how that works, but
yeah, exactly. But I think it's super cool. I always get really excited to see a new Spren. Now that we know that each different type of Spren is very, very different. We've seen a wide range of Spren. And I would say, honestly, I think the two things I get most excited for are new Spren and Herald information. We haven't really seen other Heralds much, but I'm assuming it won't have the same kind of feeling of like, oh, this is a new Herald. I can't wait to see what all they say. And with the Spren too, like I can't wait to see what they say or what they sound like and stuff like that.
That's of course not counting Zeth cameos, right? Zeth cameos are like a whole nother category.
Mm-hmm. That's less of like a new information curiosity,
that's
I guess, for now, because I've come to accept that I'm not going to get my Zeth answers now. I am very sad to admit it, but I'm not going to get the Zeth answers I want now. I'm probably going to have to wait till like book 5 or something. So
we're coming up on the end of part 2 of Oathbringer pretty quickly here, and we haven't seen Zeth at all. We've heard him mentioned like maybe once, and since then we have not even like heard of him. So
one thing on the Spren side of things, I was very curious to learn about the Ink Spren's perceptions of the other Spren, like Pattern's Cryptics and Syl's Honor Spren. Ivory doesn't really have great things to say about either. He's all kind of skeptical about the Cryptic. He's like, oh yeah, well, we can't really trust Shallan because, she's got a Cryptic with her. And then, which seems to be kind of the general consensus of, impressions of Cryptics is nobody trusts them apparently, which I feel like is a little harsh on Pattern. I feel like Pattern's a pretty trusty guy, right? I mean, he likes his lies, but I don't know. He says some useful stuff.
I've enjoyed him so far.
Yeah.
His little buzzing.
No mating. And
no mating.
Yeah. And what surprised me more was his impression, his thoughts on the Honor Spren. He had a very negative view of them as well, and he hints at some interesting stuff as if they're like a warlike group in Shadesmar of like, oh yeah, the Honor Spren go around like conquering the world or something like that. I didn't feel like we were getting the whole story there, but it was enough to make me go like, huh, what?
Do any Spren like each other? It's like we're getting the like the Stormfather's super upset with Syl. Syl doesn't like Pattern. Pattern doesn't like Syl. Ivory doesn't like anybody. Like, does anybody get along in Shadesmar? Or does everybody, just beat each other up all the time?
Maybe when they were saying unite them.
He's talking about the Spren.
Referring to the Spren, yeah. We'll see. And then in turn, the Spren will unite the world. We'll see. But that is an interesting point because I've assumed there was a beef between the Cryptics and the Honor Spren, or maybe there was like a halves or like a group of like, oh, this is the Cryptics and whatever, and they're the bad guys in the Spren world. And no one else likes them. But we've never seen the others. We know that Syl and Pattern don't really like each other, but we've never heard anyone talk about the other ones. And so this is the first time we see Ivory, and he's like, well, I don't like both of them are the worst. So I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe they don't like any other Spren types. But for my thought before, it was like, okay, Syl or Honor Spren don't like Cryptics, but the rest are like cool. They're normal, maybe even allies or something. But
I feel like another supporting evidence to this all Spren don't like each other theory is that I expected, like, when we first saw Kaladin start to interact with Shallan, I thought for sure that like Kaladin and Shallan are going to talk, and then like over in the corner, Syl and Pattern are going to talk. Like they're going to go and have a little tea and chat. Like I just thought that like Spren all coming from Shadesmar, they're going to have like a connection. Like, oh, there's a Spren, I'm going to go talk to him. Oh, I haven't seen him in a long time. Go talk to him. It doesn't seem like they do that. It doesn't seem like they interact at all. Like Kaladin and Shallan are in the same places somewhat frequently now, and yet Syl doesn't seem to ever like directly interact with Pattern. Like that seems really odd to me. I was really expecting back in my young, naive, early Stormlight Archives days that Spren were just going to be all these spirits that like were all buddies, and that doesn't seem like the case at all.
Yeah, like when their humans are sleeping, they all get together and chat, and my human did this today, But no, they don't seem to talk.
Apparently not. One thing I noticed in this chapter, it's not Spren related. Or is it Spren related? It might be, but it's not. On the surface, it's not. Jasnah has a secret in her past
that she does
too. And it's really vague here. This is one of those like one-liners, blink and you miss it things. There's a reference to like an illness in her childhood that seems to have been important. And that's like it. That's all we get. It's like this ominous illness in her childhood. Like what is that about? Paul, did you catch that? Did you hear that?
I don't actually remember this. No, I didn't catch this at least vividly.
And I know Trevor's not going to tell me anything about it, but now I'm on. Yeah, he's shaking his head over there. It's got my alarm bells up, my antennas up. I want to keep a lookout for this now because I know. I feel like I'm starting to know Mr. Sanderson here. He would not have mentioned this if it wasn't important. So now I got to know, what is this mystery illness in Jasnah's past?
That is a good question. I'm gonna add that to my list of things to look out for as we go forward. I may go back and read that again because I don't remember hearing about that, and that could be something really big. I don't know when, if we will get or what Jasnah backstory, but I would imagine that would be a big part of it. Probably, if it's mentioned here, I'm assuming it would be a large part of a backstory explanation.
So Ivory seems to be a smarty pants. So at least that's the impression I get, is that he's a scholar like Jasnah is. He likes to know his facts and explore his options. However, one of the first things we learn about him is he has misinformation for Jasnah. Back in Jasnah and Ivory's formative years, and Jasnah's asking him a bunch of questions, Ivory says explicitly the Windrunners will not return because the Honor Spren are not going to come back. And that's just wrong because Kaladin's one of the first ones to come back, and it's because of Syl. Now, we've had a couple of these implications that Syl is the exception to the rule, where she's not a lot are going to follow her because the Stormfather's upset with her that she went to Kaladin. Stormfather's convinced that Kaladin's going to kill her, which he almost does in Words of Radiance. So the Windrunners have returned, but there may not be that many more coming besides Kaladin and his squires.
We also got that strange scene from Rock's perspective, where Rock, the Windrunners are all training, and Rock sees like the entourage of Spren all watching them. And the impression I got from that is those were Honor Spren. The thought being like, oh, maybe they're waiting for candidates. But the very like, I don't know, standoffish approach that seemed to be portrayed there does make me feel like Syl is the word I was thinking of as an anomaly. It seems like she's different. And it makes me wonder if is a lot of what's happening all because Syl did what she did. Did she kind of break all the rules and set a lot of things into motion? I'm kind of wondering.
There's also that other Teft's Spren. We don't know if Teft has an honor Spren yet or not, but we know that Teft does have a Spren, and he has set oaths. So he has bonded a Spren, and she appeared to have some descriptions like an honor Spren, but we don't know that for sure. All right. Big mic drop in this episode is Jasnah knows what caused the recreants. And Ivory has been saying, yo, we can't tell people because you're weird, Jasnah. You act like a Spren. You follow rules. If we tell everybody else, they're going to freak out like they did last time. So Ivory knows, Jasnah knows, Wit knows. Wit's the one that told Jasnah, we'll find out in this chapter, and the Stormfather knows what caused the recreants.
This one caught me off guard. Like, wait a second. Jasnah knows and she hasn't told anyone? Like, we've been told, we've been hinted at, we've been shown that this is such a pivotal moment in history, and it's so important that the Stormfather won't even tell Dalinar, one of the most committed Knights Radiant we've seen, what this is, because he's afraid Dalinar's going to just turn away and say, oh, if that happened, I'm out. And yet Jasnah knows, and she hasn't tapped out and said, oh no, that breaks it for me. I can't do this. But it's also not something she's willing to tell anyone.
Right.
Like, what in the world could this be?
It is something very niche there that Jasnah didn't turn away from her oaths, but she's also not willing to tell anyone else because she doesn't trust anyone else with it.
Exactly. It's obviously not. It's not easy to tell people. Otherwise, she would have. If it was something simple or relatively simple, she could just be like, "Oh yeah, don't worry. It's not a big deal. It was just this." It's not that. It's bigger than that. But she's still there, and she doesn't even seem to be treating it like that importantly. It's like Ivory's the one that says, "Hey, we got to tell people," and Jasnah, no, we'll tell them some other day. Like, I got to sit and think about this one for a while, because what in the world could fit into all these? The Venn diagram, the circle in the middle of this is very small.
This has my brain turning quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think I'm making a lot of comparisons or connections that I shouldn't, which is a very common thing for me to do, or that I honestly don't think has any significance. I'm seeing not a parallel, but maybe a connection point between Shallan and Jasnah, and also I guess there's Spren. So just I want to try and get a couple things straight right quick. So Shallan's a Lightweaver, Jasnah is an Elf Scholar. They are bordered, right? Like they share one of the things, don't they?
Correct.
Is it Illumination or the
other one? They share soul casting. Both of them can soul cast.
Yes. That's right. And so I'm wondering if the shared if there are also kind of shared traits between Spren. And I'm wondering if that is the lies and the lying. I could see that being because Jasnah, we haven't seen from her perspective or from her past or things like that. Maybe not that it's like a deep hurt necessarily, but she does seem to withhold information and not share things that otherwise may be important. And I feel like that has been a large defining trait of Shallan's character. And so and also seeing that her Spren, we've seen that that Ivory has misinformed Jasnah, things like that. It's just got my brain turning with that. I don't know what to do with that information, but that's simply just where my mind has been going during this conversation and thinking about that. So I guess if we were to ask who do we think is gonna share, out of the people who know, which is just a couple people, I don't think Jasnah would, unless something monumental happened, because she doesn't trust anyone.
Do you?
Okay. Maybe Shallan, but she doesn't.
Out of the four we know, no. Who do you think is going to share, or are we going to find out somehow else? Is Dalinar going to figure it out? Is somebody else going to figure it out by themselves?
Is it the Stormfather, Wit, and Jasnah, and
Ivory?
Oh, okay. Well, I would say not Ivory because I don't know how he would, I guess, but I would guess the Stormfather shares with Dalinar at some point, or Dalinar asks a lot of questions and finds out from the Stormfather. I can't see Wit coming and being like, "Hey guys, here's some important information."
By the way,
yeah, he'll sing a song about the Recreant, so people will be like, "That's not real, right?" And he'll be like, "I don't know, you tell me," and then leave. And
I could totally see that happening, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think regardless of who tells, for plot reasons, I think it's going to be Dalinar who learns it, because I think that it seems like we're kind of maybe building towards that being a bit of a climax moment for Dalinar, where he's building this, he's leading this huge effort, he's trying everything he can to save the world. Is he going to hit a massive crisis where he all of a sudden doubts what he's doing is right? Is he going to get challenged by this revealed truth and think, oh no, is all of this that I've been doing actually not for the good guys or not for the right reasons, and have to make that decision? Like, I kind of feel like that's where this might be building to. So I think it will be Dalinar, whether he worms it out of the Stormfather or somehow figures it out on his own, or gets into like a vision he's not supposed to be in and then sees, whatever happened, or I don't know how, but I think it'll be Dalinar who has the crisis moment. And then he'll learn that Jasnah already knows, and then he'll get really mad at her, and all the fallout from that.
All the fallout from that. That
Mhm.
all the fallout from that could be like a whole book, but you just said it in
Yeah.
one sentence. Like, everything that else happens.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Anything else from 47?
Negative.
All right. Chapter 48. And we've talked about this, but we can touch on it a little bit more briefly. Moash has met the Parshman that Kaladin kind of, dare I say, allied with before he flew off and the Fused figure out that he was the Knights Radiant. He's found those same Parshmen, and those Parshmen are slaves because of their interactions with Kaladin. That they're punishing those Parshmen because they were housing a Knights Radiant, and so they are now slaves, and they are not holding anything back. They have whips, they're bleeding, they're pulling sleds across the bare rock. Like, that can't be fun. And Moash is the one that steps in here and says, hey, you need to be better. You can't be like us. We whipped you your entire life, and now you're whipping the Parshmen. Like, you need to be better than this, or else you're just going to turn into what we did. So stop. What are your guys' reactions to this chapter?
It seems confusing, but it maybe gives us a hint at how the Parshmen view the Radiants, because the way they treat their slaves is way better than the way they treat these poor Parshmen who had no idea who Kaladin was and were just being nice to him. They didn't even really trust him. They just kind of like, okay. Now, he helped them for goodness sake. So this seems really, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense at all. But maybe this tells us that that's just how like religiously important this is to them. Maybe that they really do view the Radiants as like demons and false gods and things like that. Like, oh, you accidentally helped this demon, you're going to get punished for that. Like, is it almost like a theological reason they're doing this? Maybe.
Right.
I could see that being the case, but I'm definitely not certain right now. I don't know if I would make a big enough call on that. I feel like this chapter wasn't as much, but it was still really good. And one thing I liked is just kind of focusing on Moash. We talked about this briefly earlier, and I feel like a lot of what we've seen is development of all of our Bridge 4 members. And I feel like the Moash from a book ago or a book and a half ago wouldn't have ever stepped up or done anything really. But all of our Bridge 4 members have really gone into a not just a leadership role as in like encouraging each other within, but going out and being great examples like everywhere they go. And it's been really cool to see like more impact from them. Which also I think is just shout out to Brandon Sanderson, just like a really good way to get a kind of a next level of in-depth investment into this world, if that makes sense. Like, I'm getting such a wide picture of the world and things that are going on, rather than just like Bridge 4, and you only hear about Bridge 4 and see them, like, I guess. So, I think that's pretty neat.
I want to balance a little bit against the positive things you're saying about Moash, because I did see those too. I did really like the fact that Moash stepped in and did something that I totally agree. I don't think he would have done prior to Kaladin's Windrunner influence on him. But there's some negative stuff in this chapter too. I was going to read a section of just kind of Moash thinking to himself and justifying his actions to himself on the Shattered Plains. Here's what he says or thinks to himself. What happened at the Shattered Plains wasn't my fault, he thought as he hauled the sledge. I was pulled into it. I can't be blamed. These thoughts comforted him. And that's a dangerous road there for him if he's kind of going down the path of excusing himself for what he did and trying to rationalize that in his mind and lie to himself that it wasn't my fault. It was other influences. I just did what anyone else would do. That's not a good thing. So some positive things for Moash and some negative things for Moash for me in this chapter.
No, yeah, that's definitely good, because if he doesn't, take responsibility for what he deserted Kaladin and all of Bridge 4, and he does beat himself up about that in these couple chapters that we've seen him. He talks about his Bridge 4 patch that he's been throwing away, and he's got his tattoo on his shoulder as opposed to his forehead like everybody else does. And he thinks about Kaladin accepting him when nobody else would. But in this chapter where he rescues these parshmen getting punished and tortured, basically, what is he doing here? He's protecting those who cannot protect themselves, right? This is, if you think back all the way back to the beginning of the Way of Kings, this is exactly where Kaladin was at the speed, even before he got to the Shattered Plains. He was in this slave wagon, and there was other slaves getting tortured, and all he wanted to do was help them until his mind was broken at the Shattered Plains, and then he mended it back with Syl and blah blah blah. But way back in the beginning there, Kaladin is so frustrated with the wrongdoings to these other prisoners, these other slaves, and that's exactly where Moash is right now. He's trying to stick up for those who cannot protect themselves. So
he definitely does have a little Kaladin moment where he sets aside all his own struggles and charges in to help someone that should really be his enemy, right? He's just been captured by the Parshmen, and he steps in to save one. So that is definitely a very honorable and Windrunner-y moment. Is that an adjective? Can I use that as an adjective?
Windrunner-y.
Windrunner-y moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or is that an adverb? I'm not an English major.
Mm-hmm. Me neither.
Darn mechanics and scientists don't know how to speak.
Fair enough.
All right. Anything else from this episode?
No, thank you. I'm done.
Are you guys, honest answers real quick, are you enjoying time away from our main characters, or is it boring? Just get to the meat of the story. Like we've really taken a pause on some of our main character progressions, and we've really spent a lot of time recently with Bridge 4 and some other characters that are not quite our main characters. Are you enjoying these, or are you bored?
So I have a roundabout answer here. So I would say I'm indifferent. Like I wasn't like, oh man, where's my Kaladin and Shallan and Dalinar chapter? I wasn't thinking that going into these. In fact, I was pretty excited to see these different perspectives. So that, but also like with our main characters right now, I feel like there's nothing super exciting going on. Like back whenever Shallan was kind of chasing an unmade and Kaladin was in the custody of the Parshmen and things like that, I was super invested. Right now, I feel like there's not. I feel like our most exciting storyline or perspective, the main character, is Dalinar, which is my last point. Is I'm happy to see that, since this is Dalinar's book, and historically, I feel like he hasn't been the most exciting storyline. There's been lots of cool stuff, but a lot of times it's political drama or rights and wrongs and things like that. But right now, him and his visions are very cool and very exciting, and it's probably what I look forward to most in our chapters.
I'm a big advocate for lore and history and world building. If you just gave me a history textbook on Roshar, I'd probably read it cover to cover and enjoy like every page of it. But I will say these 4 chapters in particular did start to feel like a bit of a drag for me. I'm enjoying learning about these bits, these little secrets that are, getting spoon-fed to us little by little. I love all of that. I love, turning over rocks and trying to figure out what's going on. But I am starting to be like, okay, but what happens next? Like, where are we going next? Are we going to go with Elhokar on his invasion of Kholinar? Are we going to get, another surprise unmade popping out of this? Like, where are we going with all this? I'm starting to get a little antsy.
Gotcha. Yeah, the only reason why I asked is because it's one of the main critiques of Oathbringer is it just drags too much in part 2. However, in one of our recent episodes, we've gotten a comment of part 3 was Oathbringer's not their favorite book by any means, but part 3 of Oathbringer was their favorite part of any Cosmere book they've ever read.
Oh wow,
That's exciting.
oh boy.
So we have a lot to look forward to, hopefully. Unless that person is just leading us astray.
Possible.
They're taking a page out of Trevor's book and they're laying some false trails for us.
Exactly. Trevor could be making this up too. I would believe that. He's got a cryptic spread and he's got to tell us lies. I'm kidding, but no, I trust our commenters. I trust our viewers a lot. So I'm very excited for part 3.
More than you trust me.
I'm sure it's all Zeth content, and that's why it's the best. So can't wait for that.
We just take 400 pages out of our book and just talk about Zeth for
that. I would love that a lot. That's all I could ever ask for, actually. Yeah.
All right, we will reconvene next week. Thanks for joining me, Paul and Eliot, on episode 68.
Fare thee well.
Doodles.